Dear students, in this lecture, we will elaborate this relative clause. As in the first lecture, we have understood the basic concepts about the relative clause, where we understand what is a clause, what is a relative pronoun, and how can we define a relative clause. Today, we will know it with the help of examples. We will understand it. So, here today we goes like this. Dear students, here is a sentence. The man who lives next door is a professor. Hoax the sentence. The man who lives next door is a professor. Similarly, one more sentence is here. The bus which goes to the airport runs every hour. Dear students, look at these two sentences. Here we can say that the man who lives next door is a professor. We can divide the sentence into two sentences. Here it's a one sentence, but we can make two sentences from it. For example, the man lives next door. He is a professor. Okay? But when we combine these two sentences with the help of who, which is a relative pronoun, so then the part of this sentence, who lives next door, it becomes a relative clause. So here in this sentence, who is a relative pronoun, whereas who lives next door, this very part, it becomes a relative clause. Okay? As I have already told you that relative clause, it always begins with a relative pronoun. Similarly, in a second sentence, which goes to the airport, here this part becomes a relative clause. Got it? Now, let's go to another example. Here is, I have a chain which is made of gold. Now divide this sentence, separate the sentence in two sentences. Here, I have a chain. So this is here a main clause. You know that clause is a group of words that makes a complete sense, or we can say clause is basically a sentence. So here is a main clause. I have a chain. That means it's a main clause because its meaning does not depend upon any other clause or any other part of the sentence. So here is a main clause, which is made of gold. This is also a clause, but its meaning depends upon the main clause. Okay, so here this which is made up of gold, it becomes a subordinate clause. As I have already told you that the relative clause is basically from subordinate clauses. So here we can say that which is a relative pronoun, but when we say that which is made of gold, it here becomes a relative clause. Now let's move towards who, that, which. You are aware about these, that they are used in relative clauses. Who is used for person, that is used for non-living things, which is used for things, etc. So that and which, they are interchangeable. We can use which and that interchangeably here. For example, but besides it, these who, that, which, they work as subject of the relative clause. For example, here are some sentences. I met the man who knows you. Dear students, who is here a relative pronoun? You know it very well. Who knows you here becomes a relative clause. But if you will concentrate, if you will focus here, who knows you, this who, it becomes here the subject of this relative clause. So these relative pronouns, they become the subject of the relative clause. Similarly, have you found the keys that you lost yesterday? That you lost yesterday is a relative clause, but that here also becomes the subject of this relative clause. Similarly, I have a cup which is made of silver. Okay, so which is made of silver is a relative clause, but which also here becomes the subject of this relative clause. Okay, I think it's clear to you. Now let's move further. Whose, you know, it is also used as a relative pronoun in a relative clause, but it is mostly used for the people. For example, here are sentences. An orphan is a boy whose parents are dead. So whose parents are dead, it here becomes a relative clause. Okay, so whose is used here as a relative pronoun. Whose is here used here a relative pronoun. Moreover, I would like to say that when uh, here we can add a one point here also for your understanding, that uh, instead of his, her, their, these are the pronouns, but when we use them as relative pronoun, we use whose. So we can say that instead of his, her, or we can say there, whose is used as a relative pronoun in a relative class. So here is one more example. Do you know the name of the man whose car you borrowed? Got it? So dear students, let's move to the I can say that another we can say relative pronoun, that is here. I would like to focus the board here first. If it is clear to you, wait a minute please. I am trying my level best. Just a minute, dear students. Now let me. Dear students, where it is also used as a relative pronoun. So we use where in a relative clause to talk of a place. Okay, for example, here are the examples. The hotel where we stayed was not clean. Similarly, I would like to live in a country where there is no corruption, nepotism, favoritism, etc. Okay, so where is used in a relative clause to talk of a place. Do you know the hotel where he is staying? After the where, we will move to the home. Dear students, home, we use home instead of who when it is the object of verb in a relative clause. So we use home instead of who. Instead of who. When? When it is the object of the verb in a relative clause. When it is the object of the verb in a relative clause. Okay? Here you should know this point. Whom is used instead of who when who is the object of the verb in a relative clause. For example, the man whom I wanted to see was not present in the shop. Similarly, I don't know the name of the boy to whom I spoke on the phone. So here, I think it's okay for you people. In the next lecture, we will further try to know about the relative clause. Thank you very much.